Okay. The one formality. My name is Mike Dekema, and we're in Corinth, Mississippi. And today is November 8th, 2013. Give me your full name.
Jerry O'Neill Finger.
And Jerry, you understand I'm recording this now.
Sure.
And that's with your permission?
Absolutely.
Okay. You were born here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tell me about your family and your family history, what you know of it.
Okay. I was born in 1947 here in Corinth. Mm-hmm. Mom and Dad, there's 7 children by that union. I'm number 5. 5 boys, 2 girls. Mm-hmm. As early as I can remember back with any clarity would carry us back maybe to around 1951 or 2. Younger brother and sister born in 51 and then in 53. We were sharecroppers.
Okay.
And of course, I always say today we're kind of like gypsies. We were here, we were there, and I think I've learned over a period of time the size of your family sort of dictated how well you could do or whether you got on to, say, one of the better farms where there was ample equipment. Larger the family, the more desirable you would be as a family to sharecrop. And of course, I can recall there were some blacks here during that time that did own their own properties. We were just not quite that fortunate, and we moved. I learned to farm at a very young age. Probably before 10 years old, we were farming. I plowed a pair of mules as well as my dad. I thought it was the most horrible life in the world. And here today I find myself back and I garden, and of course I don't have a pair of mules. I've thought about it. I have to feed those, so I chose a tractor. Growing up here, during those times, Mike, right here in this building, I'm going to share a few things that I can recall. It wasn't often that we would make it to town. And hardly ever did we come here to the courthouse. However, I can recall that right out there where the washrooms are, they were different for blacks and whites. We couldn't drink out of the water fountains. I thought about this one day last week. We were able to take around those water fountains at these gas stations. You usually find a pop machine, soda machine. We could take the empty bottles, rinse them out from that water fountain, and we could drink water, but we could not drink out of the water fountain.
Really?
Absolutely. The place that we frequent most is a gas station over here at the intersection of 72 and 45, old 45, Raymond McLean. Gas was $5, 5 gallon for $1, and that's where we had to drink. If we drank water, we had to not drink it out of the fountain. Didn't think a lot about it maybe at that time. As I grew a little more, I was actually driving at 12 all around this town. I have a brother 3 years my senior. At that time, you could receive your driver's license at 15. I'm 12, he's 15, we were the same size. Well, there was no picture on the license, so I drove more than he did. He never did care for it much. I did most of the driving for Mom and Dad in those days. By the time I was 14, my dad had fallen ill. Had, I think, 14 surgeries before he was done, and it started by a growth in the bladder one day in the field. We moved off the farm and we moved right here in town in Corinth. I attended Eastham High School my last 4 years of school.
Is that a black high school?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Eastham High School. I believe it was built in 1954.
Okay.
Since then, I wasn't living here when schools were integrated, but Eastham High School turned out to be South Corinth Elementary. And we just closed it probably 3 years ago. We constructed a new elementary school here, and we closed that building down. And right now, the school district and the officials of the city are in the process of giving that building back to the community.
Okay.
That's in the works right now. By the way, I'm a school board member here as well, trustee. I'd always dreamed that I'd get rich in a few years. I went to Chicago at 18, right, 3 days after graduation. I thought I'd be rich in about 10 years, and I'd come back home. Well, my calculation wasn't so good because I think I was earning $2.35 an hour on my first job in Chicago. In that 12 to 15 year plan, I had 2 children. I was deep in debt. I could barely pay attention, so there was no coming back. I moved that up to that 35th birthday, and I was not close, so I moved that to 50. And at 51 and a half, I retired and moved back here to Corinth.
Retired from what?
I owned a transportation company in Chicago. But you know, I just didn't start out there. There's so much I could tell you. I mentioned that I started driving when I was 12 everywhere. I always had a love for it. My last year in high school here at Eastham High School, I was asked by the principal and a mechanic friend that lived by us, and I drove the city school bus my last year in high school. It was a wonderful experience. On to Chicago, I continued that pursuit, and in '69, I paid a guy $10 to use his truck, and I got my chauffeur's license. And I went to work for a transportation company. I worked for East Texas. I worked there 14 years, and they got purchased and the merger, and I got displaced. Had a tough time there for a year and a half. Went to work for Ryder Truck Line. I was there Friday before Memorial Day. I got fired. I did. I was out of the satellite. It wasn't anything I really did wrong. I got fired on Friday. The big boss called me at home on Saturday and told me, "Don't you go back there, come back to the main office." That Tuesday morning, I was approached by one of the managers, and they asked me would I consider going into management. I thought they were joking. I listened, and I went down and met the people in charge of sales, and by Friday, they hired me in this position as a salesperson. And of course, I had to go into training and all this, and I was somewhat nervous because they did tell me that if you don't make it here, you cannot come back as a driver. You're done. They told me I had 6 months to prove myself, and I jumped at the opportunity. After maybe a year and a half, I was promoted to national accounts for this company. More money, a nicer car to drive, which they provided, and then I began traveling around the United States for them. I became convinced after about 2 years that I could handle this. And I went out and I purchased a company called Waukegan Cartage at 5 trucks. I ran it for 12 years. After I got injured, I sold out. I had 15 power units and about 30 trailers. I sold it in July of '98. Took me a while to close my books and do all that. I had already purchased a home here in Corinth. I knew I was coming back home. I came here, started that transition, and met a friend. and she put me into this volunteer mode.
Okay.
And that's really what I do now. With all my free time, I volunteer and support various organizations. I feel extremely blessed to have had these experiences. I never knew how I was going to achieve that goal. I just always had it as a dream that I could accomplish that.
That's wonderful.
And transportation helped me to get there. Well, upon arriving back, you see, I was still in my mind, even though I'd visit every year till my mom passed, I still had this fixation of mine about the prejudices that I think were prevalent during, and I'm not going to say it's that we're home free today, because I don't know if it is anywhere. But returning here with the mindset that I left with, it really put me at a disadvantage, because things are not as they were in 1965 here in Corinth. I've been able to work at any level that I chose, with the Alliance, the school board, the Black History Museum, the Historical Society, Project Attention, which is an after-school learning program ran by minorities. So I do see a different side of things today than in those days. Probably the most difficult adjustment I've had to make is that, kind of like me and this lady, you can go into the store to buy an item, and if you're not careful, you'll visit for 2 hours for a 5-minute purchase. That's what people do here, it seems.
Sure.
I found that highly annoying when I first returned home. Chicago is a far faster paced town. I've always been kind of hyper and keyed low on patience. I found that hard to deal with. In fact, I've complained at some of the stores where people are standing in line visiting. I want to spend my $5 and get out of here, but they don't pay any attention here. You just have to adjust, and everything that's critical here in Corinth is a good 3 weeks out. That's what I say all the time. It's about 3 weeks out. I love the climate. I have family here, and I've been able to mix well with people in this town of both races. I'm happy to be here, and that's really.
Back to your family for a moment. Can you trace your family roots back to the Civil War?
No, I probably can get close. On my dad's side, my father was an old man when I was born.
Okay.
His mother and father, I never met them, but that's Sam Finger, and I tried to think today. I don't remember the name of that grandmother.
Okay.
From my dad's immediate family, there was one sister and 4 boys. Okay, my dad was the elder of that group. They're all gone. That's as far back as I can go from there. Now, on my mother's side, I have a little bit more history. My grandfather and my grandmother. My grandmother was a Parks, and her father was part Indian. I got this story from my mother. He only fished, and he would fish and hunt. He didn't work in the fields or anything. Well, when Archie Hines, who is my granddad, when his first wife passed, they had 5 children. She passed away, and my grandfather, on mom's side, married a lady that's my dad's first cousin.
Okay.
And that's the only grandmother on that side that I really knew. She lived to be 104.
Wow.
She was an educator in her day. We would spend summers with them. She was frugal. She forced us to rinse our buttermilk glasses out with water and drink it in the morning. I can remember that.
That is frugal.
Quite frugal. But we spent summers with her, and she hasn't, I don't remember her birth date, but she's been deceased a good 10, 11 years.
Okay.
And she was blind when she passed, but she was mentally as strong as she ever was. She had nicknames for all of us. Mine was Cake. I don't know where she
Okay.
Cake. But she had knowledge beyond, and probably right in there, those grandparent probably would, or their parent would have had a link to slavery.
Did they pass? Is any of that passed down to you from oral history or anything?
No.
No. Okay. So that's lost, basically. Okay. And you left here in 1965. Is that
65.
correct?
Mhm.
Okay. After graduating from high school. At the time you left, obviously Chicago was an economic opportunity, but what was your mindset concerning segregation in the South and growing up here?
To be honest with you, I don't think I saw a problem with it because it was more in line of how we lived.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I'm glad it occurred,
Sure.
but I think for myself growing up in a situation of such, it has made it a little more difficult for me to put trust and faith into my counterpart. I guess that's what I'd say.
Sure.
I think children today who are exposed, racially exposed to one another, I just think it gives probably, there's a learning curve that I think they won't have to deal with. I can remember some ugly things that happened around here. Once again, I mentioned that I left with one mindset, returned thinking it was the same, but it's not. It's not quite the same. I think during integration, I think there's some things that we as black people, I think we lost in that process. See, in those days, poverty is something that draw people near, I think. There were probably, I think most anybody down here would have left home and tried to run away as youngsters because of, all those things playing in. Because of what I had experienced, once again, it's nice to see the modifications. I think people are a little bit more cautious maybe for what they will say around us or to us, and in those days, the word that we opposed the most was used quite frequently. In those days, I can remember where black men never became men. They were either boys, and when they got old, they were uncles. Uncle so-and-so, Uncle Johnny. But the manhood part somehow was left out of that process. That's just kind of how it is.
You grew up sharecropping. Cotton?
Cotton, corn. Cotton and corn were the only two crops that we marketed. Of course, we had cows and hogs and chickens and I don't know, you know what a guinea is? We had guineas in those days, but we milked the cows. We did sell milk. We had 22 milk cows at one time. My brother and I milked them every morning, strained it, put it on the road, and we walked a little over a mile to catch the bus to go to school.
Wow. It's farm life.
It didn't seem to be a problem. It was up at 5 every morning. You knew that was going to be, and there was always work because we burned wood in those days. We just didn't have a lot of idle time. That's what I'm going to say.
If you lived here till 1965, if I'm not mistaken, you'd have been here when Medgar Evers was killed. Is that
I'm
correct?
sorry.
You must have lived here when Medgar Evers was killed
Oh,
in
yeah.
Mississippi. What do you remember about that?
I don't, to be honest, the only thing that I can recall shortly after it frightened Black America, especially here in the South, and I can remember going to on Ole Miss campus in '64.
Okay.
And, there appeared to be tenseness in the air. The only reason I got to go as a bus driver, Corinth High School's bus, it broke down in Boonville. They called for this new bus that we had, and Mr. Bishop, a principal, he insisted that I drive it. So I picked him up, and we went to Oxford. As there seemed to be like this quiet hush on the campus that I can remember, and they quickly, after they unloaded, they got me. You take the bus, and they sent me over across the railroad tracks. I don't know if you understand that. Maybe they do.
Literally, yes.
Yeah.
Across the tracks.
Across the tracks. And I spent the day there with my own people, and it was quite relaxed. And as soon as I don't remember if they probably told me what time to be back, because I didn't have a phone, I know, to be back on campus to pick them up. It was a day of testing.
These are white students that you dropped
All
down there?
white. We were still segregated at the time.
What year did James Meredith go to?
63, wasn't it?
I think so,
I
yeah.
think so. And I was on campus in the fall of '64.
Okay, so integration was probably still a bit tense there.
Actually, here in Corinth, 1970 was the year they integrated schools here.
Okay.
70.
And Mr. Bishop was somewhat of a legend here, from what I understand.
Absolutely. He was a great educator and a politician. He served as mayor here for, I don't know, I want to say he was after 2 terms, and maybe in his third he got sick. I don't know if he may have died in office. I'm not sure.
Do you remember approximately what year he was elected mayor?
Late. Somewhere in the 90s.
Okay.
Late 80s, early 90s, when he was mayor here.
Okay.
And once again, I was living away, so
Sure.
those dates are not, etched in my mind as though some of the people that were here, but everybody seemed to love him. He was quite a disciplinarian. He was a great guy. That's what I can say about him as in a leadership role. And of course, in those days, we had assembly one day a week at school. Are you familiar with that term?
Sure.
Okay. He always talked to us. Most of his lectures was about how to coexist, how to overcome your obstacles, and mainly for me, it was about sticking to your dream, whatever direction you want to go. I knew I did not want to go to college. And my mom, my older brother was in school at Tennessee State. There was no money for both of us. He was able to receive some funds because of he was pretty bright. On the other hand, I was just, average. They would have had to pay, and there was no money for that. And at the time, I didn't feel that there was an opportunity here for me.
Okay.
I never even thought twice. 3 days after I graduated, my brother was here, and we went back to Chicago, where I had an elder brother, and I went to work right away.
And a successful career in Chicago.
Not the early stages, but the last. The only time, the most time I ever worked without losing time was from '85 to 1998. Those other years, I was we had a 14-week strike one time in the trucking business, and the merger, and I'm laid off. And I've done messenger service. Had an old wagon. I wasn't making any money, but I was down on my luck. When I was offered a job in management in '85, from that day until late '98, I never missed a day. And those were my most productive years working.
This is kind of an abstract, maybe unanswerable question, but you left here at 18 and went to Illinois. What was your impression of race relationships in Illinois then compared to here, and how you were viewed by white people when you got there?
In some instances, not a lot of difference.
Okay.
In some instances, I can remember, see, in my time here, you couldn't go in there. It was rare that you could walk into a front door of a restaurant in this town.
Sure.
It was always the back door. And when I look on that, the people that always did the cooking, they were like me. It's fit for everybody to eat, but they forced us to the back door to receive that food. When I went to Chicago, I was working construction with my brother, first job. We laid asphalt. Well, we went to a Burger King. It was myself, my brother, and maybe 3 white guys. Well, when we pulled up, I can remember I asked my brother, "Can we go in here?" And the other 3 guys, they were shocked for the question. But that's the first time I think I'd ever been in a restaurant in the front door. Around a construction area, not a lot of people. I didn't see any signs of prejudice. However, I worked that job one season. I had a child born here in January of '66. I came back home.
Okay.
I went to work at ITT.
Okay.
I lasted 6 weeks, and they fired me. Not all their fault. I'll be honest. They probably were justified. How candid can I be here?
Very candid.
I was doing my job at ITT. I was put in charge of the raw material department for the night shift, which was from 11:30 a.m. to 12 midnight. We worked 12 hours a day, 8 on Saturday. One day, another friend of mine that worked there, he goes out and he buys this half a pint of corn whiskey. He drinks his and he gives the other to me. I was feeling a little tipsy, and actually there was, I could remember her name. There was a Caucasian girl that worked the line over there where I carried parts, and I think she liked me, and I know I did her. And the security guard, I think his name was Dewey Shoots, something like that. Name sound familiar? He noticed we were holding hands coming out of there one night, like tonight. And the next morning they called me and fired me.
Okay.
And I remember so clearly, I asked Era Vance, he said, "You're just not working out." And I said, "Well, am I making mistakes? I'm over this department, etc., etc." Well, he couldn't, there was nothing wrong with my work except my attitude. And I had a baby. I cried a while there. I came back to the house. I caught the train at 11 o'clock that night, and I went back to Chicago.
Okay.
And that's where I stayed. The first job that I got when I went back was at a company called St. Regis. Now, that was probably the most prejudiced place I'd ever been around, where they openly used the N-word. They act like I was not around. And of course, I was the only minority working in that department. Maybe 5 or 6 guys other than myself. I got to the point where I'd go back into the warehouse, seclude myself at lunchtime, and I'd work when I'd get working 4 to 12:30, when I'd get up in the morning, I'd go job hunting every day until I found something different, because I just didn't like it. I think prejudice is worldwide, because in certain instances, I'd say I am,
Okay.
as we all are.
Could
In
be.
some aspects. I mean, I don't know what degree one want to measure themselves, but we often talk about the powers at hand. If we were the minority race, I got a feeling my people would have most of the jobs too. That's just what I think. I don't know if I'll ever be able to experience that, but I guess what I'm trying to say is what some people would say is showing a lot of favoritism. The minority rules. Any way you cut it, the minority has control.
Now, you left in 65 and came back in 66,
Okay.
and things were still segregated here, correct?
Mhm.
Having left and gone to a place where prejudice existed perhaps, but you could walk in the front door of a restaurant. When you came back, how did it feel to be back under the old way?
Old regime. You know, I don't recall Mike being disturbed about it, to be honest with you. See, at that time, I don't know that there was any restaurants here that I was just dying to go in. I mean, to be honest,
Okay.
we didn't have a lot of fancy restaurants here in 1965 and 6.
Okay.
I don't think there was a McDonald's here. All of those fast food restaurants, they were not here in 65 and 6.
Probably not any national chains, really, right?
Not that I can recall. Now, there was Cole's Discount Store that had a lunch counter right across the street here. My deceased wife's brother and a group, they were the first ones to do a sit-in at that. You know, it had like a soda counter like Woolworth. Was it Woolworth? Sounded like that. They had a soda fountain bar.
Okay.
They were the first ones to go in there and sit in. I never thought about that kind of activity, because in the truest sense, I guess I've never really wanted to be in a place that I wasn't wanted.
Okay.
It didn't bother me too much, and you know, being a farm boy, Mama cooked all the time. Her food was better than the restaurants. So, you know, that's kind of how I see that. But there were some people who were brave enough and realized the need to do the sit-ins at these restaurants, and I think it went quietly without any problems.
Here in Corinth.
Corinth. I don't think Corinth is a perfect example of racism as you'll find it in maybe some southern states, southern towns in Mississippi and maybe like Arkansas, Alabama. I think Corinth was probably not as big of a farm country as some of those southern towns, and I think that may have had something to do with it.
How would you describe race relationships here now?
I think there's a concerted effort to address it. I'm aware that I'm able to operate in some other minorities here because the need for inclusion. And once again, this is not a bad thing, but see, I know from working with the Alliance possible prospects for location here in this part of the town. They look closely at the demographics, your race relations, because they're going to need to have employees. I would think they'd want to avoid having problems within the troops. And I know we have lost an opportunity or two here because of what is said to be an uneducated workforce for some of the high-tech jobs. But I think there's a genuine effort to, well, I don't want to say amend, to include us as part of the working system, I guess is what I'll say.
Are the educational needs being met right now, do you think?
are here.
Yes.
Oh, and I can tell you, we have one of the best school systems probably in the state of Mississippi. I was just at a luncheon, Cambridge. We have adopted the Cambridge educational system here.
Okay.
We had 4 representatives there in town today. They are monitoring children, visiting classrooms, and actually, Corinth School District was chosen to and offered an opportunity to bring this learning process into play. We were chosen, I think, out of 12 schools in the United States. The director was there today. She gave us some high marks on how well we're doing. Our students are tracking well. Once again, I'm not saying it because I'm a school board trustee, but Corinth has a superior school district. We receive our award every year for meeting and surpassing expectations. Our graduation rate is around 92%. Our dropout has recovered quite well because, see, we have a recovery program. You can actually, you can drop out of school here if you choose, and then you can enter into the recovery program. You can secure your diploma if you work at it, and you don't have to be in a full day of learning at school.
Is there any affirmative action at the universities here?
At the university?
University.
You mean the high school?
No, within Mississippi now.
Is there
an affirmative action?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. My son and I have been here all week and made a point to eat and shop locally, okay? Staying away from national chains and come into local merchants and eat in all the local restaurants so that we're aware we actually traveled somewhere differently. And one of the things that we have noticed, we've had multiple meals out in various places, and I don't think we've seen a black person in any of the restaurants that we've gone to, and I don't know if that's coincidental or not.
Where did you go, if you don't mind my asking?
Everywhere I could think of. Started at the Catfish Hotel.
Okay.
And I'm not saying black people don't go there. It's just that...
Up in Tennessee.
Yeah. And Smith here in town.
Uptown.
Here.
Probably, see, not too many there. Probably the Catfish Hotel, you're going to find us there more on the weekend.
Okay.
See, there's an element here that would prevent us, and not only blacks, but it depends on your job. Our 2 largest industries here, they work pretty long hours per day. They probably don't have time to go to Smith's up here to have lunch.
Sure.
I've only been in there one time a few weeks ago for a meeting. I don't go out and have lunch every day.
Right.
I don't think you're going to see a lot of blacks at Smith's, especially during the week.
Well, I guess the question is it an economic thing? Is it just a coincidental thing? Or is there truly still somewhat of a separate culture?
I think there's a possibility of separate culture. However, I think maybe the economics of it probably will take us out of certain places. You know, when I go to Smith, I see the doctors and the lawyers, the bankers, people who have those flexible lunch periods. They can go to Smith.
Sure.
And where on the most part, see, we have very few professionals in this town.
Okay.
There is a limited number. Along with that, it brings the income into play, and quite a few of us probably would be very unhappy to go to Smith and probably couldn't afford it.
Okay. Is it, again, I guess, is it economic or is it cultural?
I'd say it's economics, because
Okay.
In these areas that I work, I know quite a few people in this town, single moms. They work 3 part-time jobs to feed their children.
Mm-hmm.
Not only do they not have time to study with their children at night, certainly they don't have time to go to a restaurant.
Sure.
Now,
Okay.
did you try Martha's Menu?
My son was there today. I haven't yet.
I think you'd see, now they have quite a few minorities that dine there.
Okay.
But that's also a moderately priced restaurant.
Okay.
Dinner Bell is another one.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we have, what's the place out here with all the food?
Right.
We have Ryan's.
Okay.
And China Palace.
And right, China Palace, where you can go in and just stay there all day.
Is there any place here in town you would be uncomfortable going for any reason?
No,
Okay.
no.
And you lived in Chicago for quite a while. Chicago, as I guess everybody knows, has had some issues over the last few years. A lot of violence, a lot of things. There are, I wouldn't say it's a common thing, but many African Americans who have left the South, gone north, and like you, decided to go back to the South. What do you think of that option for African American people? In your case, is it better living here than Illinois?
It's a lot warmer.
A lot warmer. Economically, does it work as well?
There are some things here that you cannot afford in Chicago, such as, if you're a senior citizen, you don't pay property tax here in Alcorn County.
That's a
That's
good thing.
not a lot of money, but in cases it could be as much as a couple of $1,000 a year.
Certainly.
You don't have to purchase fishing license if you're a senior. Grocery prices are down considerably.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the way to go? For most people, I'd say maybe not. But I think that no matter where I was able to go to,
Mm-hmm.
eventually I think a person is going to revert back to their beginnings, in a sense. That's what motivated me to come back home.
Go down home, basically.
To go home. I've dreamed about it from the day I left. There's some, everything is inconvenient here, sort of. If you drive a foreign car, if it's not a Nissan, you got to go to Tupelo or someplace for service, or Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that we have to deal with. I put more miles on my car than I ever have living here.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the wave of the future? I guess if a person, I know people in my age bracket that come back here because they fell on hard times and couldn't get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they have migrated back home. I may be the only person that has come back here and truly retired and do what I do. Not that I'm an exception. However, I was taught years ago, count your pennies and your dollars will take care of themselves, and I still believe that. I think it works. And I've been highly blessed to have those last about 15, 17 years of nonstop work and being in control of an operation where I can think and process and, to study in transportation, the shortest distance between a drop, the closer you can make that, the tighter the circle, the more money you'll make.
Sure.
Because you do it in less time, less your overhead. The more you trim that down, the higher your profits can be. And this company, we operated 67% for years.
Wow.
And when most companies are lucky to operate at 90, 92.
Cool.
Was small enough so I could track and measure and study routes in order to bring everything closer.
Mm-hmm.
in that circle to make money. I loved it. I still do. Everything that I do now is, I'm always cost conscious. I try never leave home to make one stop. I try never to do that. I want to make 2 or 3 stops and of things of importance, not just. But I try never run out of the house to come to town to buy a single item. It's not cost effective.
You remind me of UPS arranging the routes so they never turn left.
When I went through a period of time with my business where I went 8 months and I couldn't pay myself.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have the income. Mm-hmm. And when you begin to feel a little empty in the stomach, you'd be surprised what you try to learn.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah. So I don't think my circumstances fit everyone, but however, I've got a brother. He retired from Chicago. He moved down to Tippah County.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He's an educator. Actually, he was a principal in his last days. He moved back here. We got a sister retired from Detroit. She moved back here, and it's just 4 of us left.
Okay.
I don't think people want to come here empty-handed.
Sure.
At retirement age, because you're not going to, if you don't have it by retirement age, if you don't hit the lottery, I mean, you just.
It's not pretty.
That's it.
I think we've covered the issues, unless you have.
I sure hope so.
Other issues.
I love to talk. See, once again, I'm a trained salesman, so I could talk for days. But I thank you for an opportunity to sit with you, and I hope the information I've shared will be of some benefit to you or someone out there.
I think it will. And again, it is about sharing information and sharing stories and getting a cross-section of everybody.
Sure.
We've had some interesting people.
Have you?
We have.
Who have you interviewed today, if you don't mind?
Let's see, Miss
Lila Bowles.
Who?
Miss Lila Bowles.
When I asked her to, well, first of all, thank you. Let me turn this off.
Sure.
I really
sure.
appreciate
All
your
right.
interview.